24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at sports and asking about whether or not it's a level playing field and whether it's a fair game. When you look at the sums of money at stake, France rocked by a match-fixing scandal involving star players from the team that just won its second Olympic gold medal on the trot. With us to talk about it, France 24 sports editor Daniel Levy. Arnaud Flancard of the think tank Terra Nova is with us. We have another sports economist with us from Ann Arbor, Michigan, the University of Michigan's Stefan Szymanski, co-author of Soccernomics. And from Vedia in Denmark, Jens Sayer Andersen of Play the Game, a group that promotes ethics in sports, not just in Denmark, around the world. Welcome back to all of you. I was talking about this handball story as it broke during the weekend. It's quite spectacular. The players were arrested after a match on Sunday. People reacting to it said to me, "You know what, François? You know we loved sports. We're big sports fans, but right now, instead of talking about sports, all the radio talk shows and everything now are all about what are the odds of a tie game? What are the odds of a?" And it's like they say it's losing its soul. All this talk about betting, legal betting that's going on. Do you think it's sort of taking the edge off sports in the way that fantasy football sort of tears your loyalty between your favorite club and who you've put down on your sheet?
I think maybe taking the edge off is the right way to put it. It's a bit of an exaggeration to say that that's all we talk about. I mean, it's just that perhaps in the mainstream media, and by which I mean the kind of the news that isn't just specifically covering sport, we do cover these kind of scandals.
Takes up a lot of time in the sports talk shows.
A lot of the time, but I think sports talk shows spend more time discussing, controversial refereeing decisions, and everyone's moaning about this, especially in football, that we should have more video technology and more help for referees because we spend too much time discussing mistakes that are made by the arbiters of the sport. And we can also talk about doping, replace the word betting scandal with doping in that sentence. We spend a lot of time sort of bemoaning the level of doping and cheating in all sports in other areas, not specifically just to do with betting. It's true that betting has become further interwoven into the sort of the media reporting of sport. A lot of journalists now write for sports websites that are purely dedicated to betting. They work for betting companies and earn a lot of their corn doing that kind of work. But I think the reason it's discussed so often in the mainstream media is because it has large legal implications. It also talks about the money involved, which are colossal sums, and it kind of calls into question the kind of like metaphysical core of sport, really, which is it a fair contest between two people who are really going at it with everything they've got?
Arnaud Flancard, when you're listening to the previews on the radio of your favorite football matches, do you want to hear, well, the odds of a tie game are €1.70 or something?
Sorry.
Do you think there's too much talk about sports betting on the radio?
No, on the radio, on TV, we don't speak about. We don't speak a lot about betting in France. The advertising is quite limited in France for the moment, and this is a good thing to limit the incitations for people to bet money on sports, and we should continue on this way.
Jens Sayer Andersen, what's it like in Denmark on that score?
Well, I would rather address the issue about how it's like in the world, because we have just made an international sports press survey where we had research in 22 countries registering the sports coverage in the newspapers. And I can assure you that there is still 95% of all sports articles, they still deal with sport in its pure entertainment sense. So I would rather say that the problem is that journalists and the media in general are not educated enough and are not consequent enough in covering these background stories. When Szymanski, just before the break, declared a certain optimism, I can certainly follow that there's nothing new in human nature and that cheating in sport is nothing new. But what is qualitatively different now is that we have a new technological tool called the internet, which I think everybody has heard about. And that is a magnificent instrument in the hand of crooks. It gives endless opportunities to arrange illegal gambling for huge sums. We're talking about a market of perhaps $100 billion in net profit. And it also gives very, very good possibilities to coordinate criminal action wide. And this is what is happening. So that's why we have actually, from Play the Game side, called for such an international agency against all forms of corruption in sport, actually for the past 6 years. But the threat of match fixing is only recently dawning on the sports world.
Daniel Levy.
No, I just wanted to say one interesting thing that I think has changed in recent years, and we're talking about the difference that the internet has made, is spot betting, which is where people bet on very specific, minute details of matches. We saw this in the spot fixing scandal, which was in a trial that took place in Britain, where 3 Pakistani cricketers were actually sent to prison as well for their involvement in this. And this was, they were bowling no balls at a specific time in the match. So this is like a kind of foul ball. And, apparently the odds of this
you don't just bet on who wins or loses.
Right. People now bet on when the first throw-in will happen, or whether a no ball will happen, how many, whether frames are lost in a snooker match and things like that. And those kind of things are much harder to pick up, of course, because they can look fairly innocuous. And that's what happened in this case. But it was actually found out by a sting by a British newspaper.
Well, Stefan Szymanski, it was a lot simpler back in the days when you only bet on whether or not it would rain at Wimbledon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that increasing sophistication of technology and globalization have changed the way in which betting operates and changed the landscape, the economic landscape. But the other side of this is to say that whilst there are more opportunities for those who want to cheat in some ways than there were in the past, there are also more opportunities for those who want to keep tabs and want to protect sports integrity. So I mentioned earlier the early warning systems, which bookmakers are now able to coordinate amongst themselves and find out when they see irregular patterns of betting and then bring them to the attention of the sports authorities. I'm not sure of the details in this handball case we're talking about, but it sounds to me as if that's exactly what's happened here. It's actually that the legal bookmakers have brought this to the attention of the authorities. So in that sense, yes, it's an arms race, and the bad guys have more weapons than they had in the past. But I think also you have to take into account that the good guys have a lot more firepower in their armory than they had in the past too.
All right, we've talked about prevention. We've talked about detection. Now let's talk about punishment. In 1989, baseball's all-time leader in hits, Pete Rose, was managing the Cincinnati Reds when it came out that he'd bet on other teams' baseball games. Before he'd even become eligible for the Hall of Fame, Rose was barred for life from the sport, for life, a sport which still remembers the match-fixing scandals of the early 20th century. By comparison, Italian soccer leaders Juventus's coach, Antonio Conte, is currently appealing to have a 10-month touchline ban reduced, this for failing to reveal knowledge of a match-fixing scandal when he was at Siena. 10 months. He's just banned from the touchline. He's still the boss of Juventus.
He's still involved in the coaching
He's
of
still
the team.
the coach of
Juventus,
which is top of the Serie A. Isn't that a bit of a slap on the wrist, Dan Levy?
Well, I mean, frankly, he was actually suspended for not reporting match fixing. He wasn't actually found guilty of fixing any matches. So you could argue it was actually a bit of an unfair punishment, perhaps. He was, that is what we see now, that people can be punished specifically in that case, and also in a case with John Higgins, who was the world's #1 snooker player at the time. Similar sting from a UK newspaper who set up a meeting with him and offered him lots of money, €300,000, to throw frames in a snooker match. He played along, he said, with this conversation, didn't necessarily agree to actually fixing any frames, and was then given a 6-month ban just for his sort of the appearance of going along with that suggestion. Doesn't necessarily mean he was guilty of anything.
Jens Sarah Anderson, the coach of Juventus, what is the appropriate punishment?
I'd rather not comment on that specific case because I do not know the fine details of it. What I would say is it is true that punishment is part of a corruption prevention system. But as long as the governments, as it was always said before, do not react, as long as sports organizations are not really consequent and coordinated with governments and between themselves, then there will always be motivation for fixers just to move to the country where it's the easiest to work and to get a profit. It's what we have seen in Italy is the consequence of the lack of credibility, that people simply stay away from the soccer matches. They are losing audiences. The same can be seen in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, and that is why this threat to sport is quite urgent, and sports organizations should be the first to demand action, not only from governments internationally, but also among themselves. But what we see now is just a lot of words and very, very little action.
Interesting point that Serie A does not have the luster it did a couple of years
Absolutely.
ago.
No, I was just going to say that it has really suffered largely from the Calciopoli scandal, which was not actually to do with betting, was to do with matches that were fixed supposedly by going through referees for the sake of winning the title rather than for betting on the matches themselves. But, you know, Serie A was really the top world league in the 90s, since 2006, after Calciopoli. It's been hugely damaged. Loads of the top players don't go there. And also, if fans do stay away, you know, that really harms television money, because people want to watch matches with crowds that are screaming and you know, with fans in attendance. That really does make a big difference to the televisual experience. And television money really is kind of what makes football go around at the moment.
Last week, FIFA boss Sepp Blatter raised the alarm over the fact that Italian Serie B player Simone Farina can't find a club. He'd blown the whistle on a €200,000 bribe offer to fix an Italian Cup match between Cesena and Gubbio on November 30th of last year. Farina, who's been made a goodwill ambassador by Blatter. Stefan Szymanski, how big is the problem in Italy?
Well, I think it's one of these things that people of course, it's hard always to know the extent of illegal activity. How much crime, how much undetected crime is there? Well, if it was detected, we'd know it. But obviously, with it's undetected, we don't know. I think one of the issues is there have always been allegations against the Italian game. And to be honest with you, I don't think necessarily the corruption scandals that we've seen in Italy are, in a sense, causing the decline of soccer in Italy. Or rather, I put it the other way around. Soccer in Italy has been declining for some time, commercially speaking, and perhaps that's what's bringing out some of these scandals and actually removing the incentive to keep things covered up. And certainly, when we talk about Eastern Europe, much of the problem really in Eastern Europe is that nobody really wants to watch these games. The contests are not very attractive. People would rather tune in to watch the Premier League or the Champions League or the Bundesliga, and those leagues are declining. And many of the match-fixing scandals we see there have to do with cases where players are not getting paid their wages, and that's one reason why they seem to be more susceptible to bribes. So I think there's a broader issue here, which is about the general economic state of the game. There are, in a sense, there's too much soccer in the world. There are too many leagues, too many competitions, and the smaller ones are struggling to survive. And I think when you get into that sort of downward spiral, that's also when you get these kind of corruption issues coming to the fore.
Jens Sayer Anderson, we see that French players get gobbled up younger and younger by the big three leagues, Italy, Spain, and England, most notably. Is it the same in Denmark, where the money is sort of attracting all of the big-name players and money is sort of skewing everything towards the very biggest clubs?
I wish I could say we could boast the same amount of talent as 20 years ago that could really be attractive for the big clubs. It seems it's not.
You were champions in '92 in Denmark.
Yeah, that's. I think the players that won that championship, they are actually out of business now, or they are not, at least they're not playing for the national team anymore. I think it is certainly true that there is a very important business competition element in the troubles that football has presently. But I'll just say that I don't think that is really the driving force behind match fixing. But when you mention whistleblowers, like the Italian guy who cannot get a job, there will always be a very, very big risk of being a whistleblower if you don't have a sporting system or an anti-corruption system that is ready to be on your side and that is backed by clubs and leagues and federation and so on. So these people will remain very lonely because, as always in sport, there is a sense of being a family, and those who sort of break out of the family, perhaps break the omertà of the family, they are, as a general rule, marginalized, ridiculed, and basically left out.
There is, Arnaud Flancard, something to be done to redress imbalances. We know that the European footballing governing body, UEFA, has a plan which kicks in quite soon called financial fair play. How effective do you think that will be, forcing clubs not to have too big a deficit?
It's a very good idea, because today football clubs are put into debt, and they are working like the subprimes. There is speculation bubbles on football clubs, and one day this bubble will explode. So financial fair play is a very good idea. Michel Platini has a lot of courage to put this regulation into force, but it's not going to be easy for him, because all the clubs don't want this system, because it's not going to advantage them, and some middle clubs can go up and reinforce the competition. But all the states in the European Union should encourage this measure. If I can say one word about the sanctions against players. Today, if a player bets on a match which is not allowed, he will risk only 1 to 6 match of suspension. So
it's not a lifetime ban like in baseball.
No. It's not enough, and we should have the same sanctions than in doping.
Stefan Szymanski, will financial fair play help sort out a lot of problems?
It might do. I mean, certainly, the obliging teams to be solvent would seem to be like a minimum requirement. I mean, I'm always puzzled by this, why UEFA need to introduce a regulation. Surely it's against the law in most countries to trade if you're insolvent anyway. So I don't know how football clubs get away with that. But certainly if financial fair play achieves that, I think that would be a step forward. But I actually, although it might help, particularly in terms of corruption of players, if players are paid on time and are paid what they're promised, I think that would be a step forward. Although I have to say, I don't think that will get rid of match fixing. I think one of the things is, and to be fair to UEFA, they nowhere state that the purpose of financial fair play is to deal with match fixing. I think, we have to be realistic about this. Match fixing has been an omnipresent part of sport since its creation in the modern era. Actually, if you go back to the ancient Olympic Games in Olympia, they had match fixing back then. It will continue to be with us, come what may. The question is what is the most effective way of addressing it and minimizes the harm that it causes, rather than trying to sort of have some ambitious program for eliminating it entirely.
All right, Stefan Szymanski there. We're going to leave it on that note. I want to thank you for joining us from the University of Michigan. I want to thank as well for being with us from Denmark, Jens Sayer Andersen. In the studio here, Arnaud Flancard and Daniel Levy. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.